Welcome to the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. Thank you so much for joining us today for the bonus episode of episode 43 of the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. Hi, this is Brenda Argano. In our last episode, number 43, Megan Madden shared with us how she had been using Seesaw in her classroom with great success. Just a short time after we recorded the podcast, the whole world was shutting down due to the coronavirus pandemic. Everything escalated very quickly, and soon teachers, districts, and students found themselves having to transition to distance learning almost overnight. In today's bonus episode, Megan shares with us the obstacles she faced in the transition to teaching remotely and how she returned to one of her favorite tech tools in her tool belt. Find out why Seesaw was the perfect fit once again. And if you haven't listened to episode 43 yet, make sure you listen to that one as well to hear how she used Seesaw in her classroom. Now be sure to subscribe to our podcast because you don't want to miss any of our episodes coming up. And don't forget to check out our show notes attached to this episode and on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com, for everything mentioned in this episode. So, without further ado, our interview with Megan Madden.
Okay, so we are so lucky to have Megan Madden back with us for a special bonus episode. Thanks, Megan, for coming back.
Of course.
So Megan reached out to us after she recorded the original episode on Seesaw and said that she had so much more to share with us now that we in California have moved to sustained learning, distance learning, schooling from home, emergency learning, whatever we want to call it. Whatever it is, we're not in a classroom anymore, and Seesaw is being used in a totally, you've made some adjustments is what you shared with us. And so we would love to hear what those adjustments are and get those out to teachers who might be trying to use Seesaw or thinking about using Seesaw in their classroom. So thanks for coming back, Megan, and tell us what you've learned.
I have definitely learned a lot. So again, like Seesaw is this amazing platform that empowers students. It helps them to demonstrate and share their learning. And I have to say that Seesaw really, the company jumped to the call because, out here in California, we were one of the first states to shut down schools. And before we shut down here in the Bay Area, and we were one of the first areas to shut down, they already were on it, and they had these home learning codes ready, which just goes to show that they really listen to their community and respond appropriately. And so Seesaw is not meant for home. The whole idea was that it was an online platform for school portfolio to be shared at home, but not used at home. And so what they did is they created a home platform. Same idea, but it comes with some changes. And along with coming with those changes, you as the teacher are suddenly not in your classroom gathering bits and pieces to assess based off your lessons. You're actually teaching. And so as one of the first groups to shut down, we didn't take any time. We didn't take a week off like some schools did. We actually shut down Friday. I threw passwords at my kids, their textbooks, sent them on their way. And on Monday, we were remote learning. And I have my master's in technology, in education, and there's a huge component to that master's, which was online learning. Was not my intention to ever be an online teacher. It just happened to be part of the program. And so I went into it going, I've done this. I've built an online, platform for my students to learn. And I threw in all these great things, Google Slides, Seesaw, Paradeck. I was just going at it. And next thing I know, I was overwhelmed. Not only my kids were, but I was just drowning. And I realized that less is more. And in going through all these platforms, Seesaw really made the most sense. But because Seesaw made the most sense, I had to learn how to use Seesaw to adapt in a new way. So those new ways were, how do I teach? How do I create videos? How do I create content and curate so that they're safe online, especially for those younger kids? And so that's really what I kind of have to share today in a nutshell.
No, I think that's great because, it's interesting. You just basically throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, right? And see what sticks and what will work for you in a completely new environment, new change that everyone has to go through. And yeah, it's very interesting to see.
Right. And my kids, I teach third grade. So they're right at that, like, I feel like the perfect balance between lower and upper elementary. They're capable, but they still are young. And so it's a great age to kind of see what works and doesn't work. And I feel like it generally, if it works for third grade, it will work for both. That's kind of how I view it. But it wasn't them unable to go in and do all these items. It was me unable to assess 30 kids from 5 different platforms. I was spending 12 hours a day just trying to look at all the stuff. And so Seesaw ended up needing to be, because it's a portfolio, it was really where their work was going. But as teachers dive into Seesaw, they're going to quickly learn that if you don't, set yourself up properly, you're still going to be drowning. There's just piles and piles of work. And if you don't organize it correctly, you are just spending hours and hours trying to figure out what your kids are doing and if they're learning and who's doing what and who's succeeding or needs extra help. And so we really got into this, the mode of you need to be flexible, right? You need to be flexible with when and where, but you also need to be rigid in that what your expectations are. How you accomplish the task is up to you, but where you place it online is up to me. When
Right.
you complete the assignment is up to you, but my expectations are A, B, and C, and really defining that flexible versus rigid.
I mean, you're saying what we in the teacher service area are hearing is that the teachers are overwhelmed with just kind of being thrown into this. And yeah, your diocese did uh, close Friday and was open Monday, which was incredible. But I think that's a testament to the setup and the kind of what led up to that. Not everybody was as lucky, but what we've been sharing with teachers is exactly what you said is kind of scale it back and find what's working and really kind of focus in on that. If you're going to introduce something new, don't introduce 5 things new in the same week or even 2 things new in the same week. Introduce 1 thing new each week or every other week. Just really pace yourself so that you can make sure it works right. And, don't go all in on it. Do something really low stakes on whatever that new thing is, but really making sure that we're paying attention to the teachers. What happened? So they gave you a home learning platform, Seesaw did, and which is not what you were used to. Was it linked back to your original Seesaw? Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, so the home learning is very similar to what they have now, but it takes away the ability for them to interact as a class. So typically they would go on to Seesaw and I would assign them something, an activity or something to post, and they could see each other's work. I have what I call a sample student where I post a whole bunch of things. I have them interact online. And Seesaw took that away, which makes sense. You need to monitor student to student interaction online. And, if they're seeing everybody's work from a home perspective, well, I can just see somebody who did it before me and copy. So there's reasoning to what they did. And so when they took that away and they made it, this streamline at home platform, which is great. It's linked to their original account. And that's all kudos to our tech director and administrators who integrated that. And they're really easy to access, which is nice, these home learning codes for free and for any paid versions that you might be doing. They kind of scan in at home and they log in as they do at school. And so they're going to see the exact same platform. So if you've ever used it in class, they're going to know exactly what to do. But for me personally, I did a lot of in the moment, on the fly, show me what you're doing here in the classroom versus I prepared this lesson in Seesaw or this activity in Seesaw. And sure, they had activities and I used them from time to time, but I found that I could easily give them exactly the same information in person. So I didn't always do it in Seesaw, but now I needed to do that. And so it was very much realizing that I started off with Google Classroom, actually. My kids were in Google Classroom. And I had too many links. It was a link to social studies, a link to language arts, a link to math. And in that link, it was Seesaw here. And the easier it is for the kids, the better they're going to manage. So your focus isn't on how to use the technology. It's about how to learn with the use of technology. So I realized, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I gotta do it all in activities. And so that activities element really became prominent. And the activities are great because you have a lot of options. You can write directions. You can read the directions in a recording, which I tell my kids, you read and you listen, right? So you get the information twice. They have an area where you can post an example or a video and then a student template. So really it's set up for you to really deliver a good activity, but it wasn't adapted to create lessons. So my mindset was, I'll go into explain everything and I'll create a video, or I'll go onto my Screencastify and try it. But personally for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, Google was overwhelmed and my videos were taking 20 hours to upload. And suddenly I was like, I can't do this. I don't have time to do this. My videos are failing. The sharing settings alone were driving me insane because I would forget to share to everybody. I had to change on every single video. And so I looked at Seesaw and I said, how can I create my videos in Seesaw? And I'm not talking about using the video app. It's actually doing what the kids do. So they create videos for me. So I started to look at that instead of posting a YouTube video or a Google video that I made or posting a student example, I was going to teach them through the example portion. And what that ultimately ended up looking like was, if you are paying for Seesaw, and I will say this, if you're ever going to pay, this is the time to do it, because the features that are offered are what's going to elevate you to be able to really meet your students' needs. One of the features is a multi-page, and you have 5 minutes of video on every single page you add. So it started off with, okay, well, I'm going to teach them about character analysis. Let's look at a character we're reading a book. I started to put anchor charts and visuals on the page. And then I started to write and record myself. And every page I started to scaffold. So the first page was, all right, let's talk about what is a character. Now the next page, let's look about what are some types of character traits. And now let's look at this character. And I would build these lessons. And Seesaw is not built to be it's a presenting tool for students, but the elements that we're used to as teachers, like in PowerPoint, I'm going to have something appear here and something come in here. It's not there, but you can manipulate the system a little bit. What I tend to do is, if I have an area that I don't want the students to see until I reveal it, I take a shape, I cover it, and I turn it white. I turn it the background color, and it disappears. And it disappears for them, but as I'm recording and I go, okay, well, let's think about it. And I delete the shape in my video so things appear that I've written. Or you can take a shape or a word or text box and make it white so it disappears, and then move it to another color. So you can start to create those lessons and scaffold the information. I mean, you can create a 20-minute video in Seesaw using those features. And suddenly it's not just a YouTube video or me trying to upload for hours. It took me the 20 minutes it took me to film and a couple to create. And it's been very helpful.
And much easier to share.
Much, much easier.
And are you recording that? You're recording that as a teacher. So they gave teachers the ability to create these pages under the activities section, these multi-pages, just like the students had.
Yeah, you have the exact same platform. And so when I go into activities, there's a number of ways that you can do this, but I personally build within Seesaw. I go in and I create the drawing. The drawing is really where I personally will gravitate to, because I can add a picture and I can add anything I need to that drawing app or that drawing part of it. And so you can even, if you wanted to add in the captions, a link to a video that the students can go to. So while it's not built to be like an explain everything type situation where you can add everything you want into one little video, there are ways around it. And there's a very big movement going on right now. And I'm sure if you're involved in Seesaw at all, you've seen it. The ability to make choice boards via Google Slides in Seesaw, which is actually pretty cool because you can have the kids watch the video right there in Seesaw, and it's a link. And the only difference that never occurred to me, but somebody came up with it. You just publish that Google slide with the links as a web page.
Yeah.
And you put it in as a link, and suddenly these kids have the ability to go safely because it doesn't take them to YouTube. It just takes them to the video and it takes them to the website. So you have a little bit more flexibility to teach them within the Seesaw application.
That's so cool. So they're taking maybe like a pre-existing or a choice board that they've made on Google Slides, which has the embedded video, a YouTube video in there, but it's safe because it's embedded right there. And then all the other choice boards through the slides that are links or whatever they are. And they publish that. It's published as you just go to, I think, file, publish, make it a web page. And then you use that link in Seesaw. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So really, I mean, there's like 6 options. You have photo, video, notes, drawing, links, and what's the other one? Oh, you can publish documents. But I find I'm in drawing or I'm in link. It's the 2. The drawing, if I need to, post any kind of part of a worksheet, I just put it in drawing. I try and actually cut my worksheets down. That's a really good tip. Don't publish a whole worksheet because those kids on these iPads are trying to fit them. But I screenshot sections and I just put them on multiple pages. And so you're teaching them through the student, instructions in a different way. And then that also frees you up to then add to your activity activity, what they're going to do now that they've learned. So I think when I first went in there, I was like, oh, but I want all of this in one, and I can't. You're limiting me to 2 options. And then, there was these moments where I'm like, oh, well, instead of using the, multimedia instruction section to talk about the assignment, I'm going to teach them through that and then worry about that elsewhere. And funnily enough, and I don't know if I glitched or Seesaw glitched, somebody glitched, but one morning I woke up and my activities, what I had thought, you have to be careful, what I thought I had put in my teacher instructions, personally, because I teach lower elementary and I'm a huge advocate for making sure that you're reaching, anybody with any kind of learning challenges. I'm a stickler for reading things aloud, giving them that audio option, especially because they're at home. And I don't know, how many have parents that can just sit there and read to them, or if they get to a word, if they're going to know what it is. So I was finding that I wanted to read to my kids what the instructions were, read to them the text, whatever it was. But if I wanted to do that, I was using my multimedia option, and then there went my ability to teach. So I was, a little bit, I kept, emailing Seesaw, hey, you should do this. Hey, I'm definitely annoying them with all these things you should add. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But then a happy accident, the glitch, either I posted the multimedia in the student template or something happened. I did it on 2 assignments. They went into their own assignment and there was a recording there, and it was a word problem. And I read them the word problem and I, go, oh, well, you got to think about what a dozen is, or you got to think about measurement. I talk them through the problem, and I got all these messages going, I don't know, how to write on the assignment because there's a recording. And I go in and I realize that they can hear my recording. And then there right underneath is a re-record button. And when they click that, suddenly my recording's gone and they can write. So I started to actually read in my student template the problem. Okay, you have a lesson in, the example area. And now and I can do that on multiple pages again. So I read them the instructions. I talk to them about what my expectations are. The only downfall to that little maneuver is that once they hit re-record, it doesn't come back. But at least they have, if I get them into those routines and those expectations, they're going to always read and listen and watch and all that. You can't draw, because if you draw, it'll stay there. But hey, you have a arrow tool. I read, I talk every page, because you don't have that face-to-face this is what you need to do anymore. And they're going to turn things in. I'm like, what is this? I didn't ask for this, So I'm trying to make it as explicit as possible.
And you can't read their faces that they're not understanding. That's excellent.
And third grade, sometimes they'll ask for help and sometimes they won't. So, I mean, I think that's for any grade. But yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm so excited that Seesaw was able to. This must have been kind of in their pipeline, and maybe they just expedited the platform, because it just seems like they had it right queued up to go. It just seems
in their back pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the exact same platform, just with a couple changes here and there. And if I go back to the classroom, or when I go back to the classroom, I should say, like, these are still there for me. They just weren't things that I ever thought I would need or utilize because I was the one teaching. And it's funny because you said, oh, kids aren't always aware of those items. Like, I had a kid the first week was like, yeah, that worksheet was really hard. And I was like, oh, it was? Well, did you watch the video? He's like, no. I'm like, well, of course the worksheet was hard. You have to watch the lesson first. And so they're learning, they're learning along the way. And so setting up those, routines, I'm like, you have to first do this. You have to second do that. And then really making it clear what they need to do, and hopefully communicating that in enough ways, through visuals, through audio, through written instructions, that they not only are able to do it and independently. That's my goal. That's the hope and the dream. They can do it independently, and that they're learning ultimately.
So what has the feedback from Seesaw themselves? I mean, have you been on the phone with them every day, or how did that go? Or is it just you're making suggestions and then?
So Seesaw is very inundated, I will say that. But they have really met a lot of the needs of the teachers in various ways. So if you were to go to their website, I think it's web.seesaw.me, there's a whole section remote learning. And they have resources for administrators, teachers, parents. They have, I've been mostly in the teacher section. They have tutorials. They host a online meeting every day for half an hour, where they go through any changes or any things that they feel like people need, and then you ask questions. So that's really, I go on there, I watch. The last one I went to, they talked about a whole bunch of updates for Android and for certain computers, none that I was particularly using, so I didn't realize there were these issues. But that's not to say that our kids aren't, because they're on all kinds of devices. They talk about what their next moves are. And so, I'm tossing out my suggestions here and there. I'm not having person-to-person contact, but they're working very, very hard on trying to meet, I think, the basic needs first. Like mine are like, oh, if I could design my perfect lesson and have everything I want in the world. But they have a lot of new teachers. Schools are really turning to this as a solution, which I think was a smart choice.
And in their forums, I'm sure, and Twitter is on fire.
Yeah, I mean, they have Facebook, they have Twitter, they have YouTube tutorials. They upgraded. They have different tiers of Seesaw users now, and I think, yes, their platform is kind of geared towards this idea, but I don't think that they ever thought of it as a remote learning situation. It was always supposed to be something in the classroom, but it's clearly adaptable.
Yeah, that's amazing that they've been able to do that. And do you know if they're offering, was Seesaw one of the folks that was offering some extra stuff while we're in this remote learning situation? In other words, were they like upgrading your account, or were they just saying you're good, you've got enough to do in the free account?
You can do about 80% of what teachers are doing with the free account. Again, like, I value the paid version mainly because I have some extra features like the multi-page, which I found very useful in class, and I definitely find useful now. And there's a draft feature which I definitely use, where the kids turn their work, I can send it back and it's a draft, or kids can set it as a draft. So I definitely send something back and go, oh, you forgot to do the second page, and they can complete it. They do, through the Seesaw ambassadors and people, you can get months free of Seesaw Plus, which is like the upgraded version for a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the Seesaw for schools where you would purchase it for your school that you can get for a month free just by scanning a QR code. So there are definitely ways to use this, at least for the next couple months, as an upgraded feature. But I don't believe that, at least aside from the home learning codes, which they added in for free for everybody, that they've opened it up necessarily.
Got it. No, that's great. That's great. So you had given us a code, Megan, I think like a promo code, right, for teachers to use from our previous episode. Is that still valid for teachers to use to sign up? They can still sign up and they get some features for a while for free or something?
Yeah, so that QR codes, that's one of them. So as a Seesaw ambassador, that is my code. I believe you have the ability to scan it once. So it's a month, but multiple people can scan it. So it's, I believe, at the end of the slideshow that I created for the in-class version, and that's available.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Teachers often share their QR codes on Facebook. So if you're looking Seesaw Facebook, they'll often throw their QR code out there so you can use a few different ambassadors to get more months.
Got it. I just think that might be helpful during this time to get some of those extra features. And then that will really, in my opinion, that sells it, right? If I can use something for a month, especially now, and I'm really all in with it, and I've had all the extra features, once those features are taken away, I will pay.
Yes.
So I anticipate that Seesaw will see a huge influx of paid versions next year after kind of using some of these giveaways and the whatever free time that you can get. That's so great. I appreciate you coming back and sharing kind of these tips with our listeners, because I just can't even imagine, especially if somebody was just trying to start Seesaw, or like maybe their school said, never, no, you can't do that. You have to do this. I mean, it was like kind of you guys did. I think you guys actually were like, everybody's in Google Classroom. Did your district do that? Move everybody to classroom?
No, yeah. Thankfully, we're pretty. I'm the only third grade teacher, so we don't have a lot of. Sounds terrible, but collaboration. The fact that like we have to be streamlined, which is really, I really appreciate that, because I can kind of like do what works for me. Most teachers are in Google Classroom, but for us, this was the first year I actually introduced Google Classroom to my students. I was actually very thankful that I did, because it ended up being a tool that I definitely do use a little bit here and there. And I, really saw the benefit in the Seesaw and the Google Classroom. So I have them in both, but we had our lower elementary, they're in Seesaw. And we had one teacher who was new to our school, and she hadn't yet gotten into the Seesaw. She was still trying to maneuver just her classroom. And when this happened, we just like Friday, I was like crash coursing these second graders, like, all right, here's how you Seesaw, get in there. And, they've used it in the past, and it is very easy to use. So the kids pick up on it, but it really was what worked for you. And even though I think Google Classroom is great, and I do think it's very helpful for older kids, it's a little bit more complex than I think we need to be adding onto these kids' plates. For I think third grade is like barely like the cutoff and down. So really, we're pretty much doing everything that you would do in Google Classroom, but in Seesaw. I started off posting an agenda in Google Classroom, and I was like, oh, well, here's the agenda, and here are the links to all the activities. I can put that clickable links through the same format as those choice boards in Seesaw. So I started to just kind of integrate into Seesaw. They do a lot of writing in Google Classroom because I edit. But ultimately, I'm like, all right, now that you're done, I want you to turn it in on Seesaw, because then I'm not bouncing around so much. So while we do use Google Classroom, I find that the more I can put them in one place, especially when it comes to like the communication aspect, is brutal out there. You're trying to communicate to 31 young children who do not have any access to email or phones or have any idea how to message. And suddenly you're trying to get their attention and make them aware of items. And the more you can keep them in one place, the more likely they are to see it, to respond to you, to be able to function in this technology, Zoom and Google Meets and online world. So even though I'm in Google Classroom, I'm trying to put it all in Seesaw just to make it easier for everybody.
Smart.
Really smart. Really, really smart. Anything else? Anything else you want to share? You've shared so much. I mean, this has been, this is so great.
Yeah. There is actually one element that I think is really important. School social.
Oh.
And my poor kids, some of them are really like, I think the novelty is exciting. So they're kind of into it and they tell me, they're like, yeah, I like being able to kind of just do what I want when I want. And I'm like, that's great. And I have others that are just like, I'm sad. I miss my friends. They're cut off really from each other in ways that I don't think we always think about, because we have phones and I'm on Zoom meetings, I'm texting, I'm on social media. But for the little guys, they're really cut off. And with Seesaw's home learning taking away the element of being able to see each other, their work, I highly recommend the blog feature. And I used it here and there, but I didn't find it as valuable in the classroom because they could see each other's work in class. But I created it as a social place for them. So the blog is basically, it's in Seesaw. You have to enable it. And that's also free. You don't have to have a paid feature for it. And they can post things to the blog. Now, everything, through Seesaw has to be approved. Every single comment, post through the teacher. So even blog items, I can either decide to publish it to the blog or they have to ask. But for my kids, I want them to share what they're doing. So they're throwing in like cooking videos, how to make homemade pasta and how to draw something. And here's me and my sister singing a song, and they publish it to the blog where they can all see what's being posted and they can comment. And it's actually really sweet to see them come on and congratulate each other, encourage them, and compliment them on what they're doing, ask questions. And they're getting that one-on-one interaction. And, from my side, I realized I need to keep up being as present for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing meetings and class meetings, and I have the office hours and they pop in, and I really enjoy that, but not everybody really takes advantage of those. And so I'm very diligent about leaving voice recordings on their work. So you can record yourself instead of typing, which I actually find is faster. And I've been very diligent about recording and telling them what I like about their work. Not just the, hey, you forgot to do something or you didn't do this right. It's praising what they did do right. And what I really like is when they send me a voice message back, like, oh, thank you so much. I would like to be a writer one day. I think, and they task me in ways that I will say is I have a little bit more one-on-one interaction with them now, just because the distractions of the craziness of a classroom are kind of taken away. There's a lot more one-on-one through these messages and voice recordings and videos, which is nice. So I think that Seesaw is also really great for you to keep those relationships really up and running too.
That's awesome. I think that's great. I think that is the one thing that I just, Brenda and I were talking a couple days ago, and I was telling her school is more than just a place of learning. The building, the location, it's that, but it's also where those kids have their relationships and their community and the people that they're with, sometimes more than their family members, they're with their schoolmates. And so I think that we're missing, I know mine are really struggling, just, being home and just missing their friends. And that's been something that I think I'm glad that you're paying attention to, and that there is that blog feature that is allowing them to connect with each other, because not everybody has an iPhone or iMessage, or not everybody has that available to them, especially in the third grade. I know that those are just really hard to keep those relationships up. So that's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to share this episode with our listeners. I'm excited because it's one of a few probably episodes that we're going to be talking about transitioning using technology and just kind of cashing in on some of those tools that teachers have in their tool belt and how they can pivot those into this emergency learning time. But then how to take those and even transition them. So I think a lot of teachers might be being introduced to Seesaw for the first time in this space. And so they're going to need to go back and listen to that other episode that you recorded when they get back to their classrooms next year in the fall. And like, okay, now I need to figure out how to do this, how to queue it up and work it in my classroom. So awesome. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, I think it's a really good, like, the whole use of Seesaw is, integrating their life and sharing it, what they're learning with the tactile areas where, like, oh, here's what I built or here's what I made and let me explain it. And you can still do that at home. It's just, it's not a worksheet, Yeah, you can do worksheets on Seesaw, but hey, we did like find an array in your home and then show me what the array is and what's the multiplication division problem for it. Just it's less about like, oh, just filling something out, but having them really find and interact, which I think is really the trend of 21st century learning, right? Making it relevant and authentic. And, it's less work for you to have to correct worksheets and more, relevant to when my kids are explaining something, I know whether they got it or not. So I do think that Seesaw hit on something in the classroom, but now that we're at home and that divide of being able to pass out copies is no longer there, hopefully we see a rise in that and see that genuine learning happening and application in their lives.
Absolutely. That authentic learning, and the want. I want kids to want to learn. I want them to be curious about things, and I think this is an opportunity. It's not the way I would have hoped that this would have happened,
Right.
but that's been something that I've been working towards trying to accomplish. That was part of the reason we launched the podcast is because we wanted teachers to use technology so effectively that it was a relief for them, so that they could in fact make learning more authentic by kind of offloading some of these other things. And that leads me to another thing that I've been telling teachers is don't reinvent the wheel, right? Like if there's something already out there that you can use, bring that in and use your time to do more authentic assessment or that one-on-one connection with your students, and offload the teaching part to whoever made that video before that's just as good or whatever. Unless it's something that you really, like you were explaining, like you're scaffolding properly and you're doing all of those things, that doesn't require a lot of effort typically on a teacher's part. So whereas like really reteaching an algebra lesson, those Khan Academy guys did a pretty good job of that already. Like you don't need to do that, but teaching like cool things that are unique to your grade level and to your class and to your students, that's a different story. So I'm super excited. I'm super grateful that you reached out to us and wanted to kind of update our listeners on what this looks like. And I think this will be a hit with everyone out there who wants to learn more about Seesaw and in the home learning, emergency home learning situation.
Yes, good. Yeah, and I hope people are also feeling that, like you said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like use what's out there, use the activities. Don't feel like you have to be amazing right off the bat. There's a lot of resources out there, which I think is really great. And I'm actually really excited. I'm like, oh, I'm now creating everything. I don't have to teach next year, right? Now it's already done. No, but it's like, hey, it's created, it's there, and I'm happy to have those resources now. I mean, yeah, taking a lot of time, working many, many hours, but hey, it's there, which is
right.
Great, so.
Right.
So I have a question for you. I saw a meme of what would it be like if your teacher was a famous YouTuber. So are you using like a famous YouTuber kind of personality when you're doing some of your videos or your multimedia, or are you being your authentic self?
I'm being my authentic self. I do sound a little weird, in my opinion. Like very nice. I sound very, very nice online. But I definitely do the Bitmoji stuff, to like make it a little bit more fun. But I don't. Hopefully, my kids aren't too into YouTube yet. I don't know if they're into that as much, but no, I find that they're right now I'm trying to figure out incentives on getting them to kind of just really put in that effort. Some are definitely self-motivated and yeah, you're killing it. And others are like, yeah, you're not giving me anything special here anymore. So what am I working for? And in my head, I was like, oh, well, we'll do like Netflix parties. And like, I could do little things where we watch like a half an hour in the top students or whatever. And it's really cool to think about these options. And so I find that, I don't know, just connecting with them as myself is pretty nice. I will say this about remote learning. And I did have a parent, not even like 3 days into this, she has a great son, like great kid, an apology letter about how she didn't appreciate me enough. And I laughed because I was like, well, you've got it easy. You got one kid at home and he's a good kid. But I really enjoy being able to kind of like teach and connect with them without a lot of the extra distractions, I will say. And so I find that, when they pop in on my office hours, I can have a one-on-one conversation in the quiet of my living room, which
Right.
never would have happened before. So there's a great opportunity here to really get to know them deeper, I think, even though we're farther away.
Right. That's the thing, is being able to look back on this in the future as a gift and not a burden, I think, is an interesting way to try to just slow down and just look at your whole situation.
Yeah, I had a kid come into my office hours are like, I'm on for like 2 hours. They pop in, ask questions or clarification. He just popped in. He's like, oh, just here to talk.
Oh,
like, all right, like let's talk. Like, what's it go? And it's
sweet.
nice, and it's not something that would have happened at school. So I think that there's definitely something there, which I think is important. Like, I love the voice messaging and the ability to see them, because I think that keeps that connection that they're so craving right now.
I was wondering if can you share like one of the lessons that you did?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Okay, so this is an example. And so they're learning how to use division to solve fractions. So this would be a lesson video. So I outlined the questions I would have done in class and I showed them via my drawing tool. And then I colored in the shapes by just turning them a different color to identify how many. So it just kind of like helps me. I guess it helps the kids kind of just focus on one thing at a time.
Sure.
So that's a lesson. And then I, as a Catholic school teacher, I was very happy with this little project I did, which is more the authentic learning. Oh my gosh, the kids. So I had them find pictures, whether in a magazine or online, and to create a cross of what Lent was and Easter, meant to them. And they shared a picture, and then they had to explain, what they did. And they're really great. Like, this is nice because like this project would take me like 3 days in a classroom setting, but they did it in a day, and they were so reflective, and because it was just like, tell me what you picked and why and what it means to you, and just so like genuine. I actually like shared a whole bunch of them with my staff because they were just so good. And this kid right here, this kid gives me a run for my money in class, and he is just doing so well right now. So it's kind of nice to see, those ones, and he's really thriving, which is great. So yeah, there's like, it's a big mix of projects, and then like, just here, pick a question and tell me what you think about the story that we're reading. I make, like templates for them to draw on. So like, here's a page out of their Reading AZ book. And then I said, you need to highlight the adaptations. And then I want you to demonstrate what one of the plant adaptations here with drawings and labels. And so they're interacting and then showing me what they learned from it. So it's kind of like I will say that like teachers, we're used to kind of, like copying out of books, and suddenly we can't. But a lot of it's just kind of easier to make your own. And so that's kind of the time consuming part. So, I will say I was definitely in a much better position to enter this than other teachers. However, like you said, like it's a great opportunity to, sometimes you got to kind of like jump into the deep end and figure it out. And even though I still feel like I fell into the deep end a little bit too. So you figure things out, and what works and what's important and what's not important. And personally, I'm like, I don't need you to answer like 20 math problems. I'd rather you show me one little thing here and there. So I think, like you said, like transforming the way we think about it.
And just rethinking assessment too, like rethinking formative assessment versus those big summative assessments is huge. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Oh, yeah. I had one question. I just want to know if you could go take us through that last few days before you went completely online, and what that transition was like for you as far as getting the students ready, getting yourself ready, just talking with your administration and other teachers, and just walk us through that.
So we were definitely like aware that we needed to start being a little bit more diligent about hand sanitizer and washing hands. And I want to say the Monday before we shut down, suddenly we, at our staff meeting, which was the Wednesday, it was okay, like we need to start social distancing, the fact that like we need to move our desks apart, or we need to like be a little bit aware of like not playing tag at recess. And I don't honestly like my kids, if they could sit on top of each other at all times of the day, they would. Like they just don't. And even though they understood, we talked about it in the sense that, you don't need to be afraid, but we need to be aware that we can carry things, and we need to squash it where we are. And so we were good about talking about it, but we didn't really move into action because it still seemed like this distant, not really gonna happen thing. And then it was still this like, oh, well, some districts might close. And, you're thinking as a school, like, no way is school gonna close. Like, that doesn't happen. And then San Francisco shut. And so we're in Oakland, but we're private, we're the Catholic school system. So San Francisco shut, and we're like, all right, we need to kind of start thinking about this. And so we were given a few hours like relief to just kind of plan, like just have some kind of emergency maybe plans. And an hour is nothing. Like you sit down for an hour and you barely get anything ready. And then Thursday night, I think, so it was Wednesday, we talked about it. I got 1 hour on Thursday. Thursday night, Oakland shut down. They didn't even go in on Friday. We had a half day Friday. We went in and I was like, we're getting shut down. Like there was no way that we didn't get the word yet, but we were shutting down. And so we luckily had a half day. So I made every one of my kids, I said, okay, you're writing down your username and your password to every single thing we use. And we made key rings. They piled their books. They cleaned out their desks. And I tried to keep it as normal as possible in the fact that we still did our normal end of the week routine, but it was crazy. It was just like, go, go, go. But we still didn't know we were getting shut down. It was just in preparation. So I was telling my kids, I might see you on Monday, but just in case, here's a 50-pound backpack to carry with you. And after school, so like 12:30, 1 o'clock, because we had a half day, we were like, all right, we're not coming back. And it was 2 weeks, and then it was 3 weeks, and of course, so it was very whirlwindy. And we did come in on Monday, the teachers did, and we kind of went through what the expectations were. And then halfway through the day, it was everyone shelter in place, go home, make sure you have food, make sure you have, what you need, what your family can survive on. And of course, we don't know what shelter in place is. We're thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't leave my house. I don't have anything. And my biggest thing was I don't have a desk. I have nowhere to work. So I ran to Target and I bought a foldable desk, and I threw as much as I could from my classroom into my car. And that was it. And I haven't been back since. So I know some teachers are able to go back and they're packing up, kind of cleaning out, and some aren't allowed back at all. So it's, basis by basis, but it is very, very jarring, I guess. And I feel bad for, my students, because I don't think that they really understood. I think they were like, oh, cool, a little bit of a vacation. And now they just realize they're not coming back. And that's hard for them.
Yeah,
it is. And I think that, that's one of the things, again, it goes back to that social aspect of school, of especially when they left, and my son was the same way. The Thursday that you were talking about where you had like an hour or whatever, that was his last day of school. Friday for him was a teacher in service day. And so at that point, Wednesday, we were like, oh yeah, it might happen, same as you. And then Thursday I was in San Diego at the Diocese of San Diego, and we were like, yeah, maybe. And then Thursday I heard that most likely Los Angeles Diocese was going to be shutting down. Oakland Diocese, San Francisco had already shut down. And I was like, we are going to be shutting down. Mm-hmm. So his school, he left school, said goodbye to all his friends, and didn't have closure, right? It was like, and I think a lot of schools, and I feel bad. I don't have a senior, or I don't have an 8th grader, or I don't have a middle schooler. Like I don't have a kid that's transitioning to a new grade level, or graduating high school, or graduating college. I mean, that would be heartbreaking. But the fact that they didn't have closure, they left school and thinking they were probably coming back, and then didn't. And for young students, that's confusing. For older students, that's scary, right? Like there's that anxiety or that kind of trauma of like, when is this going to end? And when you can't answer that as a parent, you're like, I just failed as a parent because I can't tell my kid when this is going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the normalcy of seeing you, their teacher, on a regular basis, hearing, being able to talk to you. But the novelty, yeah, my son was like, I want to be homeschooled. I want to be homeschooled. And I was like, hey, guess what? Now you're homeschooled. He's like, I don't want to be homeschooled anymore.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't mind as much the working from home, but I don't like everything else. Like I could do a little bit of this, but not all of it. But yeah, I mean, even for me, I'm like, oh, I didn't like give my kids a hug. Bye. Like I genuinely thought we were coming back. I thought, oh, by after spring break we'll come back, and it is. It's like you didn't have that closure, and I don't think anybody did. And even online, while I see them like some parents email just these like heartbreaking emails that, face to face, their kids are great, but they're like, they are just so sad.
Right.
And they're, and some kids who in class are just killing it are struggling because they don't have what they need, whatever it is. And, we have parents who are doctors and who work in clean industry and finance, and they feel that stress as well. And I told a parent the hardest thing for me is I don't see them, in the sense that a huge, probably 90% of a teacher's job is just reading your kids, reading their body language, their moods, how they're doing, watching them. It's all observation. And I see them, their best selves, in these moments, and I see their work, but I don't see them coping with the day-to-days. And I don't, when I see them and they're like, oh, hey, and then I get an email like they were in tears for an hour, I'm like, how do you deal with that? So,
and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking as a parent. It's heartbreaking as their teacher. And I read an article, and it's going around. It's just giving those kids grace, like just giving them time to process. This is not easy. I know that I've asked for extensions on my kid's behalf. Certain things just are not meshing with the home. He was used to getting things done at school, and now there's like these breaks, and it's just been a struggle. And I think that the impact of this, we're going to feel it, I think, for a while. I don't think, and as a nation, but as a school community, I think every school community is going to be feeling kind of the ripples of this next year as well. And we're going to be figuring out what this new classroom is going to look like next year, because it's not going to look the way it did when you left it. That's for sure.
No, I'm hoping it'll look closer to what I left that they're predicting. I feel like there's a lot of prediction right now. So I'm trying to just not predict. I'm trying to just wait and deal with the facts as they come. It is kind of funny to think about, how long have we fought to have less kids in the classroom, more one-on-one. And now it's like, well, okay, now you're saying we need it. How are you going to do that? And that, remains to be seen if we're going to need to. But it is, like you said earlier, like this is going to change the way that we teach, whether it's a little bit of a kick in the pants to like do a little bit more technology and more authentic, education projects, or if it's, the way we structure our classrooms, or they talk about, oh, well, if people are having trouble getting to work, you can still work remotely, when they said it's not possible. And yeah, it'll be interesting. But I'm hoping it's more positive than negative.
I think so. I think that we as educators, when we figure out what next year looks like, and then even moving forward, whatever that's going to look like moving forward, we now have a whole new view on what learning and teaching looks and feels like. And for some teachers, they were like, peace out. This is not what I want to be doing. I don't want to have any part of this. And for other teachers like you and the amazing teachers that we work with, they like embraced it, and we're constantly having sessions where people want to learn more, tell us more, how to do this, how to do that, more. They want to better themselves for the sake of their students. And those teachers are going to be able to take whatever they've learned in this new medium and move it into their classrooms and make their classrooms a more effective place, whatever that's going to look like. And I think that's going to be the positive that's going to come out of this. But at the same time, we're going to be dealing with, just a whole like mindset shift in learning, in teaching. And it's gonna be. I'm fascinated by it. I know that's. I mean, I'm excited by it, and I'm sad that this. Like I said, I'm sad that this is the way it happened, but I'm excited that this is happening because I think it could potentially, like you said, kickstart a new education revolution. It could change what historically has been education for so long. But I just sincerely want to thank you again for coming on and talking. I know we did not have this pre-planned. We literally just got on and free-formed this. And so we didn't really have an agenda or an outline for this episode. But so I know we got on some kind of high level distance learning stuff, emergency home teaching. That's what I'm calling it, emergency home learning. That's my new word for it because it's not homeschooling for sure. I'm not a homeschool teacher. I'm barely a good home mom. But I think that thank you for sharing what you've learned and your experiences with our listeners and with us. We sincerely appreciate it. And we wish you the best of luck with your students this year, the remainder of the year, as you finish it out in an online space, and stay in touch with us, please.
Yeah. No, thanks for letting me share. I wish I was one of those great teachers that could make really cool videos and be like, hey, look how awesome I'm like, this is too much. I just want to tell somebody and be done. So this is much easier.
So, well, thanks, Megan. We appreciate your help and you're sharing all your resources with us. And we will we'll be talking with you soon.
Thanks, guys.
So, all right, thanks.
Bye.
And
we're out.
Thanks for listening to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or send us some feedback on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com. We would love to hear from you. This will help us deliver the content that you want to hear. Thanks, and we're out.